All right. Well, while everybody's sort of settling into our weight wellness webinar, I'll start with my introduction of myself. So I am Tess Weir, and I'm located in Oregon, so I'm around the Oregon Intel campuses, but currently mainly residing remotely. And next we have Miss Mackenzie, and she'll tell a little about where she is.
Yes, thank you, Tess. I am Mackenzie. I am one of your dietitians. I am physically located in Arizona, supporting the two Chandler sites we have here at Chandler and Ocotillo, but just like Tess, supporting around the country and the world virtually as well. And we are very excited to have Cole with us for this session as well. So I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself.
Is anybody,
Hello?
we can see there's a,
Question
something
about
about someone's having trouble with audio. It might be limited, but yeah, it doesn't seem anybody else is having audio issues.
All right. Well, let us know. So my name's Cole. I'm located in Boulder, Colorado. I'm one of your virtual performance coaches on the team. And I'm so excited to talk about this topic today, as I think it's a very popular topic going into the new year. So we'll be answering all your questions.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's get this started. Looks like everyone's in there. For the person that can't hear audio, it might be better to kind of pop in and pop out, the typical, have you tried turning it off and then on again? Always seems to work well with technology. Sometimes ourselves too. All right, so our title today is breaking down energy needs for losing fat and building muscle. Not everybody wants to lose. Maybe some people want to gain some lean body mass. So we're going to start with a little teaser, a little question here. Feel free to pop this in the chat. Just make sure it says to everybody when you're replying so we can see your answers here. So how much does your metabolism decline each year? Feel free to throw your guess in there. We'll give that a few minutes, 1%, 2%, we're moving up there. Somebody says too much. 1%, okay, 20%, 10. Okay, we're seeing some quite big numbers, okay, perfect. Somebody's in the know, I think, a little bit. One of them gave a specific age of when that is. Well, interestingly enough, age does change it in terms of lifestyle, but that's not necessarily metabolism. We're going to talk a little bit about those two, a difference there. So a study with over 6,400 people from 29 different countries, so there wasn't just a United States sample there. They started people age 8 days up to 95 years. What they found was that between the ages of 20 and 60, our total energy expenditure, we'll explain that a little bit, our basal metabolic rate really actually remains stable. And that it isn't until that age 63, somebody had that right answer in there, that we see both the total energy expenditure and BMR start to go down by 0.7%. And I've said two things there, the different, like total energy expenditure and BMR, and then somebody had kind of a question that in regards to active lifestyle. So Mackenzie's going to kind of give us what are the definition of these two little things. So Mackenzie, you ready to take it away?
I am ready.
Excellent. Here you go. Here's your slide.
Okay. So yes, like Tess said, there's a lot of different words that kind of get thrown around. There's metabolism, energy expenditure, all of these things. So what are they? So basically, metabolism is a really big word for just all of the processes going on in the body to help us basically allow us to keep functioning, keeping us alive. These processes can be things that we're doing to break down, like the nutrients that we're finding in our foods, and converting that into energy. It also accounts for processes that build and repair things in our body, different tissues and everything. So this basically fuels all different kind of functions in the body, and this is a constant process. So This isn't something that stops just because our body may be at rest. Our body it's constantly working. Our metabolism is constantly working. There are some different things that can affect our metabolism, some different factors that we'll kind of talk about. So that can be things like muscle versus fat mass. It can also be age, sex, physical activity, genetics, all different kinds of things. But we have the metabolism side, and then we also have what is called our total daily energy expenditure. That's kind of a sum of all these things you'll see here on the right side. I'll kind of start to touch on it, and then I'll pass it over to Cole as well. But basically, we have a big chunk of this, which is our basal metabolic rate, which is basically the calories that our body requires just to stay alive. They're the calories that we need for our organs to continue functioning, for our heart to continue beating, our lungs to continue working, all of those things. So that's a huge part of it. Also, another part would be the thermic effect of food. So this is basically energy that is expended when we are consuming our food, digesting it, and also for our body to be able to absorb that food. These are a couple pieces, but Cole, if you want to kind of touch on this side as well.
Of course. So as you can see here, through the basal metabolic rate and the thermic effect of food, that's already a ton of your energy expenditure, your total daily energy expenditure right then and there. So when we look at exercise, a lot of people, go into the gym and are like, oh, I need to go in and burn a ton of calories. In reality, in your total daily energy expenditure, it honestly doesn't play that big of a role. It obviously plays a massive role in your overall health and well-being, but when we're talking about energy expenditure, it's honestly just a little slice of the pie here. So then when we're talking about recommended exercises, I always like to follow the American Council of Sports Medicine, which recommends for adults at the very least 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise. You can go above that, but moderate intensity, I always like to tell people, they're like, what is moderate intensity? I like to say like 6 out of 10 effort, constant through that whole period of time is usually a good rough estimation for rate of perceived exertion. But NEAT is kind of something that doesn't really have a recommendation right now. And I know what you might be asking yourself, what is NEAT? It's going to be a big word here. So it stands for non-exercise active thermogenesis. So for the purposes of this presentation, we'll be saying NEAT. And NEAT is going to be all of the movement throughout your day that we don't link into that exercise category, right? This is going to be you standing at your desk, you doing yard work, washing the dishes, picking up your kid, placing them down. All of that falls in there. Now, the NEAT category can make up a very large part of your energy expenditure per day, depending on how active you are. So we're going to be going into the next slides here to kind of talk about how we can possibly optimize NEAT and just kind of talk about the situations of how we can improve our NEAT throughout the day, or maybe how we haven't in the past. All righty. So the potential impact of NEAT. So we're going to do a little self-assessment here. So after working from home, did you start sitting more and moving less throughout the day? I'm just curious. Feel free to throw in chat. Some people, I feel like, maybe started moving a little bit more. Some people might have, got comfy. No, more, definitely. More, less movement. I'm seeing a little bit of, like mixed answers in the chat here, right? So whenever we're talking about, movement and exercise, it's always important to note that you can make a massive difference in your energy expenditure by optimizing your NEAT. So getting more movement throughout your work day, taking those workplace breaks. Next one here, are you more likely to take the elevator than the stairs? So this is a great one here. So feel free to throw in chat as well. I know we have chat's blowing up here. I'd also like to add in here, do you park close in the parking lot or do you park far away as well? Another great opportunity to kind of get neat in, right? I'm seeing a little bit far. Yeah, there it is. That's one of my favorite ones to get a little extra neat in. So this is a big question I want you to ask yourself as well. If you're doing a workout and it's intense, are you more likely to sit and be less active throughout the day? It's cold in Colorado. Yes, it is. Yes. No, more active. Probably no, absolutely. So this is something that also you want to be very mindful of whenever you're making, your New Year's intentions, your New Year's goal setting. Some of us might want to go really, really hard in the gym, but when we're talking about either putting on muscle mass or, losing fat, losing weight, it's really important to think about this stuff, right? If you go do a really, really hard workout and it's taking away from your NEAT, okay, that might overall create less energy expenditure overall. So maybe doing a moderate intensity exercise while including a walk throughout the day might be more beneficial than just really getting in a hard workout, right? The last question here, how often do you get up from your desk? So this kind of all ties it back together. NEAT can have a massive impact, not only on your ergonomics, making sure that your tissue's going great, but also making sure to increase your total energy expenditures to reach your fitness goals. I always like to say it's not what you do 1 hour or like 30 minutes throughout the day, like you do through exercise. What matters is what you do with the other 23 hours. And we already lose 8 hours to sleep, ideally. So what are you doing with those other hours really, really can have a very large impact on your total energy expenditure. All right, I'm going to bring this back to our wonderful registered dietitians.
Thank you, Cole. So I was thinking about this the other day, and it was like, there's a little bit of an analogy in a car. Like, when do we get the best gas mileage is when we're doing this kind of consistent, longer drive, right? And that's kind of like, once you get into a long exercise session, the body adapts and kind of gets really efficient. But our cars are less efficient when we're doing all these little small trips, and probably the same thing happened in the human body, making all these little, I'm going to get up and move here, get up and move here, and I'm going to use maybe a little bit more energy, less energy efficiency, because I haven't adapted to kind of, the energy system of that steady state. Anyways, it was a strange analogy. If we want to be like not energy efficient with our human bodies, maybe we try to get up a few more times than we want to. But let's move on, because we're getting stuck on one side of this equation, especially when our goal is here is to talk about energy for losing or gaining. So in the end, this becomes a story of energy balance, right? So we're looking at not just the energy out, but what is the energy in? And typically it's an average over time. It's not really what we do over one day. It's over what we do over the course of a week, 2 weeks, a month, year. One day we might be over in calories, but the way things balance out, sometimes we're lower. And typically for weight loss, we're looking to be in an energy deficit, meaning I'm taking in fewer calories than I'm expending in my day. And for weight gain, especially that muscle mass, most time we should be in a caloric surplus. Now, typically we hear a lot that people want to gain more lean body mass and lose body fat, which can be possible, but really it's probably best if we're choosing one of those goals over the other and focusing on that. So we might want to really focus on, all right, let me focus on getting more lean body mass. Maybe that's your current intake, and then work a little bit later to sort of lose that fat loss. Usually people who can gain and lose at the same time might be early in their exercise journey. That might be the more typical person who's able to do that. Always recommend, let's start small, both with that deficit and the surplus. I've a lot of times work with people trying to gain weight, and it can be just as difficult to try to gain weight and add more food coming on. Now, there was a question out there that somebody had that's buried in the chat, but I did write it down. It was like the percent TDE for somebody who's an athlete. We have here a link. This is, and you can just type it into the Google TDEE calculator. and you can plug in your age, gender, the amount of exercise that you do, and it'll give you what your estimated energy expenditure is so that you can look at that. So if you wanted to use that, it's a tool that's out there for everybody. But again, we're talking about calories in, calories out. We hear a lot of times in social media that that's not true, that that's oversimplified. But there is, in the end, truly calories in, calories out is what's going to change our weight. However, it's incredibly nuanced. And so Mackenzie is going to kind of dive a little into what are these nuances that sort of make it, is it really calories in, calories out? She's going to dive into that. You ready, Mackenzie? Take us
Yes,
to the
I am.
world. Take us to the world of the nuance.
Yes, thank you. Happy to. So, like Tess said, simplifying things, calories in, calories out, but what does that really look like? So it's helpful to know how many calories are in the foods that we're eating, how much we are having, because at the end of the day, like we talked about on the previous slide, if we are wanting to gain muscle, we need to be eating more. Losing fat, we need to be eating less. But looking at the quality is also incredibly important. There's a reason that we recommend the foods that we do. And through different like diets that you see online, a lot of it is, eat less, serve yourself less, have less food, have less calories. But when we're thinking about the types of calories that we are having, it's important to know how digestion might change with the, it might affect how those calories are stored in our body, how many calories we are taking in. And so a perfect example of this is with fiber. So say we're eating a whole wheat piece of bread and then a white bread. Well, basically the fiber that's in that whole wheat bread, that fiber isn't absorbed easily in our body. So basically what it's doing is we're eating it, it's making this full journey through our body, through the digestive tract, to our large intestine. And we are basically then feeding what's called our gut microbiome. And we are now using the calories there. That's some of it's going to that. And then we are also taking in some of that just for ourselves. When we're eating just a piece of white bread or some of these more, processed foods, they're just pretty quickly absorbed in our body. So more of those calories are just, coming straight to us in our body, fewer into the gut microbiome, because it's not taking that full journey through our digestive system. So research has shown that basically with this, higher amount of fiber, these more complex foods, the whole foods, effectively it's reducing our calorie intake overall, because it's not just being quickly absorbed, it's being used, making this full journey through our body. And we may recommend different eating patterns based on specific, dietary needs for you, different goals, all of that. But at the end of the day, the energy balance is what's going to be super important. So while we may recommend certain things for, long-term success and providing us the nutrients that we need, when it does come to the calories in, calories out, you'll see on this table on the right side that all of these popular diet trends or patterns that you may see, at the end of the day, what they are doing is creating a caloric deficit, depending on if that's decreasing, the amount of certain food groups over the other. At the end of the day, we are creating a caloric deficit. And so on that same train, so if we're talking about how we want to create that caloric deficit, what we want that to look like, Tess, do you kind of want to go over some tips on how we can create that?
Yeah, before we do that, we're gonna take a moment to answer a question posed out there by Sam. And the question is in regards to whole wheat bread. Our recommendation always looking for choose sometimes a wheat bread. You would be careful. It should say 100% whole wheat. We're looking for something that maybe 3 to 5 grams of fiber per serving. And in regards to the glycemic index, that's a pretty individual response. And it also depends on the load of the carbohydrates. So looking for, I mean, you can, if you're having trouble finding breads that are high enough, or you maybe don't take a lot of foods that are high in fiber, maybe choosing some of the breads that do have a little bit more fiber. But sometimes that added fiber might not necessarily change that total glycemic index, because we're looking at that. We're looking at part of what helps us have a lower glycemic rise in whole grain is that the carbohydrate is bound up in that husk. And as we chew, that's how those carbohydrates are slowly released out of there. So if we're just looking at a bread where they've dumped just extra fiber, but maybe the flour might be a little more refined, we might not really in effect change that glycemic load of that particular bread. But that glycemic index is really something that can be very individual, interpersonal differences. So, but again, maybe looking for those breads that are higher in fiber would be best for that. That's my thoughts on that. Anything to add to that, Mackenzie?
I think you said it perfectly, Tess.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to some little simple tips of, how, I mean, obviously meeting with us, looking at energy, what are the calories in, but, not everybody wants to track everything. So sometimes there are simple ways to reduce the number of calories that we're taking in. So one might be looking at reducing our overall portion sizes. So our example here, where maybe some people recommend, smaller plates, things like that. Adding in more vegetables, maybe making more of that plate, half of the plate vegetables, so that you're reducing the carbohydrates that you're eating. So, if you're used to eating this much, trying to tinker it down just a little bit. Always plain water instead of maybe a caloric or sweetened beverages can be another way, because those sugar sweetened beverage can be upwards of 100 calories. And so you imagine if you did that every day, we take one of those out, we've taken down about 500 calories or more out of our week. We might also look at what we're doing in regards to snacks. So higher calorie types of snacks also tend to be a little bit easier to eat a lot of, so maybe we want to choose an apple instead of the chips in that afternoon. So we're going to limit the fried food. So you're going to choose, when you go to a restaurant, instead of getting the fried chicken, you're going to get the grilled chicken. So those can be easy swaps just in your normal daily life to reduce the calories. So I already gave that next one away. So our cooking methods can be good there. Steaming, roasting, baking, stir frying. Typically stir fry, we're just going to use a little bit of the oil. Even with some of the roasting, we're just using a smaller amounts of oil. So it could be looking at the way that we are preparing those foods, as well as limiting some of those. Okay, but not everybody is here to hear about like reducing. Okay, I got to read these comments. Calorie dense snake and limited sugar has been quite, yeah. So thanks for sharing that, Iman. And then the free apple and the caffeine. Yes, please choose the free apple. The other thing I like about apple is that I can't overeat apples. Like I eat one apple, I'm good as a snack. I eat a cookie, boy, I want to go back there and get at least 3 more cookies. And I don't care. I wouldn't care if they cost $2. So anyways, all right. So Cole, you're going to give us a little assistance here on that. Or Mackenzie and Cole, I think, are helping us out on how do you get more?
Yeah, absolutely. So with adding or creating a calorie surplus, adding more, we're kind of going to look at the opposite of what Tess was just saying. So instead of decreasing portion size, we want to work on increasing portion size. And this isn't saying double everything that you're eating, but focusing on some of those. Yes, exactly. And with anything, we want to do things gradually. So maybe increasing things by half a serving or so, half a serving to 1 serving, and maybe focusing on those things that are a little bit more calorically dense. in your meal. So rather than increasing the vegetables by a serving, we're not really going to be adding a whole lot there, increasing our protein by that much. And then also choosing things like nutrient dense beverages. So this can be done through things like milk. So if you're doing like the fat-free milk right now, don't be afraid of doing increasing that to maybe like a whole milk or something. And same thing goes for other kinds of dairy, like our yogurts or cheeses. Also adding a smoothie in between our meals. So adding that can be a great nutrient dense snack. And if you're already doing a smoothie, are there ways that you can make those more calorically dense? So can you add things like nut butters or adding like oats to that or something? Just if you're kind of just doing the fruit and the milk right now, what are some things we can add? Adding in more calorically dense foods like healthy fats. So adding avocado on top of salads or to sandwiches, burgers. Also adding things in like nuts or nut butters, again, maybe to your oatmeal in the mornings. And then also aiming to try and have a source of protein and carbohydrates with each of our meals and snacks, and really trying to spread that out throughout the day. So not just focusing on one meal over the other, really trying to spread those things out so we're getting that consistent nutrition. But Cole, do you have any ideas, anything to add on here, either creating a calorie surplus or calorie deficit? Any tips that have worked for you?
Yeah, so I am in that category of creating a calorie surplus, right? So some of the strategies I always like to use are kind of psychological sometimes. So one of my favorite things to do is if you're trying to create a calorie surplus, use a large plate and try to fill that plate up. Okay, that way psychologically, a lot of us have been, pre-programmed to clean our plate. So oftentimes when you use a larger plate, you'll naturally want to, finish up that plate. So might be a good opportunity to get a couple extra calories in there. Now, on the opposite side for caloric deficit, creating caloric deficit, use a smaller plate and fill that bad boy up, right? So you have the opportunity, because even though overall it will be less food overall, you're tricking your brain to think, hey, I got a nice full plate of food here, even if it's on a smaller plate. And even if you clean it off, overall, you're consuming a little less calories. Some other strategies I like to use is, taking some inspiration from, some Eastern cultures, eating slower, possibly using some chopsticks just to slow down, having yourself become full a little bit quicker, or some awesome ways also to create that.
Yeah. And I think that, Cole, not to interrupt you, but it kind of, keep your microphone on. It kind of leads into one of our comments that we have there in regards to, let me scroll it up there. A satiety index, which I haven't necessarily heard of specifically what that index is, but apple or carrots are giving you more satiety per calorie. That might be related to you're going to be slowing things down, chewing foods, which kind of provides a little bit of satiety there. It's also going to give you a little bit more fiber. So I don't have a metric per se for this, but again, typically if I know after having children, that was one of my tactics to slow my eating down. After I have my kids, it's like, okay, I'm going to add a lot more lettuce so I can really slow this meal down, feel more full with maybe less of the main entree that we had for the family dinner. So the index, I don't necessarily have a particular metric per se, but just kind of bouncing off what you're talking about there, Cole, and that is, slowing it down, because it gives that satiety signal. So we have two ways to feel full. One, protein is, we could talk about that next in our next session, satiety of protein, but also the slowing of the signal, the stretch receptors of the stomach, those sort of send the signals to the brain that say I've had enough. So there is a lot to kind of that piece there of that slowing down to it. Anything, and we have one more, the dangers respect to protein, or I would never recommend a macro. I'm not sure if you mean eating only one macronutrient. Definitely not recommended. You're going to miss out on other things like micronutrients. Fat, protein, carbs are all considered essential nutrients for a reason. I would recommend you pop into one where we have a little more time maybe to dig into that. Typically, protein is mainly an issue if somebody is in renal failure, and higher protein, those people who are in renal failure need to have. So it's usually more in a medical situation where we might see ramifications of protein, but that's a number that is very specific to a disease state versus a healthy population and a healthy person. But you definitely do not want to take only one macro for all of your energy needs. You will be in trouble. That's kind of the segue. Cole, did I interrupt? Are we ready to rock there? You had all those great tips. I was kind of monitoring the chat while trying to listen to you. Because we can listen and do other things at the same time, right? Not really. Anywho, so let's kind of take a moment here, segue a little bit, wrap things up here. So we're always giving you little tips here, what to do. So maybe find ways to increase your NEAT. My favorite one is get up, chop some vegetables, or maybe go fold some laundry. So always seems to be laundry. Mackenzie, I'm gonna let you monitor the chat while I talk. And then, try a small swap in your diet. Some of those little things that we discussed. Try doing something that's just very simple. Evaluate your exercise. Is the type and amount helping you reach your goals? If you're not sure about that, we've got our Intel Vitality team coaches. You would talk to somebody like Cole to get what is the goals that I have, and let me tell you, they know what they're talking about, what you want to get done, the type of exercise that's going to best. When it comes to the nutrition side of it, that's where people like Mackenzie and I, part of your Intel Vitality team, nutrition specialists, are here to help you. So please, if you want to dig a little deeper into those macros, our next one, mastering macronutrients and lifestyle strategies for long-term success. Let's see. How many nuts are too many? Assorted nuts are my protein. I will give you the elevator speech of this for what is known about health ramifications or benefits of nuts. Most find what we need is 1 ounce of nuts in a day to get the benefit of nuts. And 1 ounce is going to give you maybe about 3.5 to 7 grams of protein. So as a source of protein, they're not incredibly high in protein, but they are a great snack. But again, 1 ounce of nuts is about what is beneficial. What's too many? That could be a very personal question. Some people might do better at 2. So let's begin the wrap up. Great questions, everybody. Thank you for putting our next one up there, Friday, January 26th. And Cole's got his. You want to talk to him about how to set up your nutrition, and excellent. Anything else to add, Mackenzie? Cole?
I don't think so. Yeah. Join us for part 2, where we kind of dive into macronutrients a little bit more. But just want to say thank you to Cole for joining the session. It was super helpful having your insight.
Yes, that was
we appreciate
awesome and fun. Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year, everybody. Your
Happy
Intel
New Year, y'all.
team is here to help you with your goals. Feel free to reach out. Bye, everybody.
Happy New Year's, y'all.
Bye.